all this technological change and how we can work together with governments, with the traditional sector, with grassroots organizations, and very importantly with consumers, on how to develop these concepts and how to develop these business models. So following the previous interventions, I will quickly summarize our vision on the sharing economy. Definitely we're talking about a historical phenomenon, a change of paradigm, something that goes beyond one single business model. Basically, and building up on what it has been said so far, we're shifting from a 20th century perspective where the access to credit, the mass publicity, and the obsession for property, and a relationship between a producer and the consumer, unilateral, is being replaced by a more 21st century perspective where the online reputation is replacing credit, the power of the community is replacing and the networks of people are replacing the old mass publicity, and where the shared access to assets are basically overrunning the old obsession for property. And actually, very importantly, it appears a new relationship between users. The role of the consumer is being enriched. If traditionally the consumer had this passive role of being a client of a service, suddenly we see how, thanks to the new technologies and the new peer-to-peer platforms, the passive role becomes more active, and the roles of producer and consumer are very, very easily interchangeable. So in this context, how did Airbnb start? It did actually start quite randomly when 3 young entrepreneurs in San Francisco took the opportunity of a large design conference in the city where all the hotels were fully booked to host in their place 3 attendants to the conference. They created this platform, they created this web page, and actually as a kind of a joke, very much smiling, they call it Airbed and breakfast, because actually they hosted the visitors with airbeds put on the floor in the living room. It wasn't only the fact that it revealed itself as a good business idea, they also found that the personal relationship between the guest and the host were bringing something more meaningful than a typical commercial transaction. And this connects with the power of the community we discussed before. And basically, the platform, the Airbnb platform, has developed since as a technological tool designed to put in contact 2 peers in a context of transparency and trust. Airbnb basically is an information society tool that creates different tools that allow trust to happen between 2 unknown people that have all the power on the transaction, all the power on the booking. The host and the guest agree on the price, agree on the dates, agree on every single condition of the booking. And that's very important in the context of the sharing economy, in the context of peer-to-peer platforms, because that's what it makes it different from other business models in the e-commerce sector or in every sector in the past. Basically, the individuals become the main characters and become active consumers, not only locally, but globally, and with interchangeable roles. So basically, we are talking about real people and real meaningful experiences at a global scale. This is all about Airbnb, and that's how the platform has been designed. I don't know how many of you have used the Airbnb platform. I could ask you to raise your hands, those who have used it. Fantastic, quite a few. You will see and you will know that the profiles are very wide, that the images are extensive, that the ratings and online reputation tools are intense, and this is made for a purpose. This is made precisely to provide this transparency, to provide this trust. So here I would like to show you how this business model grew over the last years and achieved these figures in 2015. So since 2008, more than 50 million people have traveled using Airbnb around the world. There are Airbnb hosts in more than 34,000 cities, in more than 191 countries, plus Cuba, because we were the first American company to give a meaning of the new good relationships between the US and Cuba. And in August, we achieved the peak of 1.5 million people staying on Airbnb in one single night. So here I'm not talking about Airbnb only. I'm showing these numbers to prove that this goes beyond the trend, that this goes beyond a given business model. The sharing economy, it's really an innovative, a technological change that is changing the way we travel, but the way we consume, the way we exchange, the way we actually understand our identity online. So, as my intervention today, they asked me to talk about impacts. I'm going to talk about impacts. And for us, again, it's important. I'm part of the public policy team at Airbnb. Our job precisely is at the same time as we grow, what is our role in the sharing economy, and show these impacts and share these impacts with the society, and very particularly with governments and the regulators. I'm going to show you data that are global. These are global trends that come from the different economic impact studies we've been producing in the different international cities in the world. We see consistently different trends. In every city, we could nuance the indicators, but the trends are homogeneous and very, very consistent. We see how the majority of hosts and properties are located outside the main traditional tourism areas in every city. We see that, generally speaking, guests stay twice longer and spend 2 times more money than traditional tourists. This it's connected to the very nature, to their very interest. When you are actually, you will see later that they are showing more interest for a local experience, and this helps to understand lots of these indicators. Very importantly, 50% of Airbnb hosts spend their money in the neighborhoods where the listings are. This helps us spread visitors to those areas that traditionally didn't benefit directly from tourism. It has positive impacts in local businesses and neighborhood businesses. In terms of host profile, we see how globally most of our hosts are sharing the home where they live. And this is crucial for us as we are actually helping introduce a new model of accommodation that sometimes that shouldn't be confused with traditional models of accommodation. It's simply sharing your home in a non-professional way, in a non-regular way, has interesting implications in terms of how to open the door to these new activities. We see that how globally our hosts, 50% of them have low or moderate income levels. In the south of Europe, if we go to the economic impacts we've done, it's a bit higher than this. We can see that in Barcelona, 75% of hosts are or in the average or below the average of the medium income in Catalonia, or in Madrid, 60% of the hosts are equal or below this average. Interestingly enough, 47% of hosts said that the income they receive by Airbnb helped them stay in their homes, so afford the cost of of living and precisely the cost of housing. When we address the guest profile, or what kind of guest this experience is attracting to cities and destinations, we see how 76% are interested in exploring a specific neighborhood, and 89% are state that they want to live like a local. Again, they are seeking a more meaningful experience. Finally, on global impacts, I'm not an expert and I won't go into details, but as these collaborative consumption models don't need building more or creating new assets, but on the contrary, it's all about making a more efficient use of existing assets. These models are extremely competitive in terms of water, energy savings, and greenhouse emissions and waste management. So we saw that the environmental impacts are relevant, are important globally. And now I would like to share with you one case study that starts with the same impacts. And I would end with a reflection on how we dealt with the governments, how we dealt with the country in this case, on how to understand the sharing economy and develop fair regulations that is allowing this market to grow, and that is setting a benchmark for the rest of Europe. I must say that this is not the only good experience we have in Europe. The same kind of conversation I'm going to explain now, we have had in the Netherlands, we have had in the UK, we have had in the north of Italy, in Milan, we have had in Portugal, we have had in different jurisdictions that curiously surround Spain, where we are now. It's also interesting to know that France is the first Airbnb destination in the world, and Paris is the first Airbnb city. Also quite similar to Spain. Guests coming from America represent a 16%, and coming from Europe represent the majority of the guests. 72% of the guests state that their experience through Airbnb helped them wish coming back to France again. And as we saw before in the global trend, the guest is seeking for a meaningful experience. 91% want to live like a local. 74% of Airbnb accommodations are outside the hotel district. It doesn't mean that there are not Airbnb listings on the hotel district, but it really has a capacity to spread to other neighborhoods. The average price is 40 euros per night, and the average stay in length of stay in France is 4.2 nights. Again, this is quite similar to Spain. It's basically twice longer than the typical tourist. It helps the host to make ends meet. 52% in France are low to moderate income. 53% of hosts state that it helps them to stay in their homes or afford the housing cost. Earnings are used to pay regular household expenses. This is 48% in France. In Barcelona, the economic impact study we did, it was 60% of the hosts who stated that. And interestingly, the income they make, it's a complement for the main source of income. So it's clearly a non-professional activity for the majority of the hosts. These data are very, very similar to the economic impact studies we did in Madrid and Barcelona, which are the only ones we've done in Spain. It's all around 300, 350 euros income average. a little bit more indirectly, but quite relevant, we see positive impacts in encouraging entrepreneurship, in supporting entrepreneurship, in supporting other sectors such as the seniors and the elder people. I will start by entrepreneurship. We see, for example, in Spain, how 30% of Spanish hosts have their own business, and 70% of them state that the money they make with Airbnb help them boost their own businesses. And as we say in Spain quite regularly, and I'm sure that many of you will understand me, it also helps to change mentalities. It also helps to change mentalities in countries where entrepreneurship has not been in our DNA. So we see this as an indirect positive impact. I mentioned the seniors. We see how the people, the elder people, retired people, see in hosting an activity that it doesn't only provide them supplementary income, but also give a meaningful activity for their lives and really develops their quality of living. And then talking about the local economy, we also say, again, that they stay longer than the typical visitor, that they spend more than the typical visitor, that they spend more in the neighborhood where they are staying. In Paris, it's 42%. In Barcelona, it's 40%. In Madrid, it's 43%. So we are talking that neighborhoods like La Latina in Madrid, like Nou Barris in Barcelona, are seeing how there is direct economic impact. We could even say that for the first time coming from tourism. And then, obviously, it also generates taxes for the country. Then we see how in France, Airbnb is included in all the official statistics, in all the official communications. It's part of the ecosystem of the tourism industry. In a moment where the traditional industry is also growing. So there where Airbnb is, also the tourism industry grows. And this applies to Spain as well. There's another aspect which is also interesting. How useful it is, the sharing economy in this context, when big events happen, when big events that really puts the cities under stress in terms of capacity of coping with more visitors. We have the French examples here, but we could actually proudly say that we will be official partners of the Rio Olympic Games, which is actually a milestone for any sharing economy company. This happened because we were already informal partners of the World Cup in Brazil. I think it's 2 or 3 years ago. And actually, up to 20% of the visitors for the World Cup stayed on an Airbnb in Brazil. That was particularly useful, not for the country, but for those cities where they had a stadium, where they had games, but they didn't really have a stable infrastructure. So this flexibility, this empowerment of locals to take part in this activity really helps the city in these big events. And we are seeing how the cities are taking advantage of it and are adding this as an interesting angle. Finally, I would like to share with you this French case as a concrete example, but I would like to emphasize that these kind of conversations we are having with different governments, with different players, with different grassroots organizations. Basically, the conversation we had in France was creating or developing fair regulations for this activity that are proportionate, that are well adapted to the figure of the host, in a non-professional context, in a non-regular context, and complement this by tools developed by the platform, such as the collect and remit tool. The platform, on behalf of the host, will collect the tourist tax and remit it to the French government. So, and then we can see how the French government meets with our CEO, includes Airbnb in the official report on tourism figures by the end of the summer, or as you can see in this slide, the City Hall, the Paris City Hall, celebrated with Airbnb the fact that they became the first world destination on Airbnb. So we see how first they amended the housing law in France in order to make sure that the host in primary residence had no restrictions to share their homes with visitors. Primary residence can be shared without any registration process in France until they reach 4 months of activity. And for secondary residences, the actual requirements are set up by municipalities. Finally, we see how we are collecting on behalf of the host the tourist tax. We started implementing in Paris. It will be deployed in other French cities. It's also working in Amsterdam and in 5 more American cities. And this is yet an example of the different tools that technological platforms can do in these conversations with the regulators, in these conversations with the users community. Finally, and just to finish, I would like to emphasize this idea. I mean, we've seen in the presentation from Dr. Dirks, we've seen in the presentation before. It's very important that in a context of innovation, all the players involved spend their time understanding the phenomenon, defining concepts at all levels, first from the academia, from the business models, and it's also very, very important that the regulator understand that with all regulations, non-adapted regulations, it's so difficult to work, and it's also important for them to understand the right angle, the right perspective, and develop fair rules, fair adapted rules, which actually goes primarily in benefit of the consumer and in benefit of the economic development of the cities. And that was everything from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Angel.
Thank you.
We have a little time for some questions or comments before the coffee break. So I would open the floor for any queries to Maria, Angel, or myself. Yes? It doesn't work. Do we have a microphone? Yeah. Yeah, or you can just speak up. Yeah.
It's only one question. It's about the social impact and the urbanistic impact for planification. I think it's a very important point. The relationship between the people that live in the city and tourists. I think it's a thing to analyze.
Yes. Yeah.
I think maybe I would like to see the impressions you have about this.
For all of us, do you want to start, Angel?
Yeah, definitely. It's one of the most interesting angles in this conversation, particularly for us, for Airbnb. We see that home sharing, or the capacity of locals to host travelers in the place where they live, it's precisely a way to empower them to attract more sustainable tourism, more meaningful experiences, and also to empower them with regards to the city as well. I mean, it helps them stay in the neighborhoods where they live. They can stay in their homes, and they can keep the traditional character. So we see that this particular kind of host can be a very powerful tool in order to address this challenge which actually exists We see that, yeah, tourism apartments, we see that actually traditional accommodation, not only kind of accommodation that can be in the platform, have an extensive presence in the city. So in this complex conversation, I think we have quite interesting arguments, and it's one conversation to have. I would say it's an important one, and it's yet to be fully understood or fully taken advantage of what the sharing economy can do in this context.
In terms of research, if we look at the impact of tourism, it has always been expressed in economic figures, and this is also what we have seen the presentations from Angel. It's overnight stays, it's lengths of stay, it has the direct and indirect economic indicators of tourist flows. What I think that we need to think of for the future as researchers, to think of other types of indicators that look more holistically into the impact of the collaborative economy. So how can we think of the ecological footprint that I have also seen in your presentation that was quite interesting to look at, and also the social impact on neighborhoods when you have got a new type of mobile consumer without any citizenship rights and no citizenship obligations to stay there. So I think that is absolutely something that we have to look into in partnership with practitioners. Maria?
Yeah, well, I think that, for example, we have a really more information about accommodation, Airbnb, Uber, big companies, but the small companies, which is the case, for example, with tourist guides, free walking tours, we don't have so much information, and then we cannot just provide the impacts and effects, because actually we don't know more about it, how it works. We need to compare, to make comparisons with different destinations, and then we'll see which kind of effects. And as Sylvia mentioned it before, we need probably to open new indicators more broadly that provide more information with the social impacts, especially that it will be more linked with tourists and with tour guides and free walking tours.
Yes, please. Yeah, we could hear you.
Okay,
Yeah,
no.
thank you.
Yes, this is Maria. Well, I am Mariana André from the University of Barcelona, and in fact, I'd like to join this debate, not to ask something, just following with the answer of the colleague. I'd like to say, well, tomorrow we will have the occasion to discuss more and more, but linking to the answers and to the question, I think that sometimes we have to also focus that of course, we have a problem of the coexistence or of problems in the city and social problems. And so we are talking about sharing economy and collaborative economy. So our first objective should be to be good neighbors in our neighborhood. So it has no point. There's no question on this. But sometimes I think, and let me be a little bit provocative, sometimes we are a little bit, we have a little hypocrisy, because we talk about the impacts on the society, but we forget that the offer is created, is promoted, but the same society who wants this money for paying their loans or whatever. So this is not such an easy question, such an easy point to be dealt, because we are complaining that we have a crowded neighborhood or we have noise or whatever, but we forget that it's our neighbor who's putting his flat or whatever on the net to take the incomes. So of course, being collaborative or being involved in this new economy means being collaborative in the first stage with your own neighborhood and with the society you live in or you live within. But there's another paradox in this sense. We complain, but in the same way, we are the same people that are putting the offer using these platforms. So sorry for joining the debate.
No, I will just wanted to complement your comment. Thank you, because I think that within this sharing economy, I mean, this is this morality, duality that we are in this capitalist market structure, but you want to define a new sharing economy, a new way to share things, but at the end, you are paying something, you are receiving something. But I think that we have also kind of the power relation. I mean, the consumers have more power than businesses, and we are also consumers. So in that sense, we are part as a consumers. We want to have some benefits and profits about it. Also, we wouldn't want to pay. Why I will pay 15 euros for free walking tour if I cannot pay anything? So I will take a profit of that. So we are kind of duality in our moral things, I would say.
My turn? Okay. My name is Miguel Galmez. This question, well, it's two questions. Go for Angel, Airbnb. The first one, I haven't logged into the website of Airbnb for a long time, so I'm wondering whether you are able to identify if an apartment or a house is a home or is just a touristic business of the owner. Is there a chance to differentiate if you are a user? This is the first question, and let me add the second one. The second one is, what is your opinion, or how do you argue on not the virtues? You explain all the virtues of the program. I use Airbnb, so I like it, but we all know that there are also many negative aspects, and let me address two. The first one is the obligations that your competitors have, apart hotels and hotels, and the other one is the creation of employment, which is a very important aspect in Spain. So these 2 points, please.
Regarding the first one, it's not difficult to know what's a primary residence through the platform. Particularly if you have used it, more than once. You can see lots of photos. You can see a large profile. You can see if the hosts have 1 or 5 listings. If have one, there are different elements of transparency that really makes you very obvious the kind of place you are going. And also, in case you are interested in one specific experience, before the booking, you have at least 2. I don't know if it's 2 or 3 opportunities to contact your host and make sure that you are finding what you seek. So yeah, in this context, I think there's a clear distinction. And then on the 2 issues you raised, the first one on competition or unfair competition with incumbents and traditional players. Here, I would like to share what's our vision and what's the vision of the competition authorities in Spain. Our vision is that first, the competition is healthy when it's allowed to happen. So the more competition, the better. But in this specific market, we believe that the Airbnb guest or the travelers that Airbnb brings to a destination is a different kind of traveler that is complementary to the existing traditional accommodation. It's not the same a tourist that goes to a hotel than a tourist that goes to someone else's home. So we see how the hotels are growing and are achieving record numbers in parallel to the growth of the sharing economy model. And then finally, I would like to emphasize the opinion of the Spanish Competition Authority, CNMC, as well as the opinion of the Catalan and the Basque competition authorities, who have been already being vocal about the sharing economy. They are actually more radical than us. They say that the sharing economy is opening markets, it's absolutely positive for the competition and for free competition. And actually, the only limit or the only challenge to free competition and to healthy competition in these markets are those regulations that are introducing barriers of entry based on the interest of the incumbents. So in Spain, the competition authorities basically think that it should be the barriers to entry for these new players should be removed rather than improved. And in terms of employment, I think it's a very wide, vast conversation on traditional economy and the way jobs are defined, and new economy and new business models. We could say that as this kind of activity don't really have yet a clear definition in terms of jobs, what we could emphasize or we could focus on is on the economic impact. I mean, the money that pours into the economy is also developing the economy. So we can calculate, for example, in our economic impact studies, we calculate the number of jobs that would be generated by an impact, a given impact of this million of euros in a given city. So I think that we have to collect more evidence, but what it's self-evident precisely is that a large economic impact brings growth and brings jobs. So it's not what I would like to say in this context is that this conversation has to be taken up with a very wide perspective, and we can basically be confident that jobs and economy is being created.
Hello, this is Juan Estrellas from Uptour Baleares, the association that tries to protect the interests of the people who share houses. I would like to add from Angel just talked that in Balearic Island there's a study that in villas and tourist apartments, the employment is there are 23 people from each 100 persons that come to these villas. 23 people are employed or self-employed for the business, against the 15 people that comes to the hotels. That for 100 people that comes to the hotels, 50 people are employed. So there's a study done already, and it's a government study, and we took it for to do our own study, finding out that the 45% of the people that comes to Mallorca or Balearic Island uses the sharing economy. Apartments and villas and houses, whatever. I would like to ask you, just for clear something that you were saying. I would ask you a question that as we are working together with the government to make a new regulation that we expect that for next season is going to be ready. I would like to ask, when the regulation of Paris, was any problem with the parts of the city that should be destinated to the sharing economy, or it was decided from the beginning that it was wide open? I don't know if.
I think, well, I couldn't share the very details. I would say that it was a rather long conversation on concepts, and the key was opened by the housing law, that basically, based on the French Constitution, recognized rights on your own home that went beyond any commercial or economic activity. That was kind of the key of these agreements, but these are very long, complex conversations because it really affects lots of fields of work and regulations, and it's difficult to pick one. Every regulatory context is different. These activities are regulated by different levels of government and administration that have to be combined. So what we expect in Spain, in every jurisdiction in Spain, is to have the same, actually we are having the same kind of proactive attitude to go in detail, to find solutions and to find the right regulatory framework for our users, actually.
Actívate el micro.
Thank you, speakers and moderators, for these fantastic presentations. Now we have 15 minutes